Well, I think we have a very enjoyable program set for you today, and it's my honor to introduce Mitch Fox, who is going to be the moderator of this program today. Mitch is the host and producer of Nevada Week in Review, who most of you from Southern Nevada already know, but for those of us from Northern Nevada, he's a nice new welcome face for us. Thank you so much, Mitch, and we're looking forward to the program.
How's that? Everybody hear me? Pretty fast for a TV guy. All right, I'd like to welcome you all here, and it's great to see so many familiar faces. It's almost like a reunion time. First thing I'd like to say is that, yes, Mitch Fox, host of Nevada Week in Review for some 24 years or 25 years here in Southern Nevada, covered the state legislature. You can follow me on Twitter, by the way. I always get the shameless plug, Mitch_Fox at Twitter. I'd also like to recognize Carol Villardo. Give her a hand. Where is she seated? Just a little story about Carol. My first legislative session, believe it or not, was 1979. I didn't know anything. I mean, I couldn't find my way around anywhere. And this lady was so patient with me, she practically mentored me. And I will tell you, I don't know anyone in Southern Nevada, perhaps except with the governors that we have here today, that is as respected by both ends of the political spectrum as Carol Villardo. So please give it up again for Carol and all the great work she does for this organization. So I'm going to head and introduce our esteemed guests, and then one by one they'll come up, get their mics on, we'll get seated and get the program underway. So we're just going to kind of go in chronological order. First, Robert List. Robert List served as the 24th governor of Nevada from 1979 to 1983. He served as Carson City District Attorney and Nevada Attorney General before becoming governor. Welcome, Governor List. Next, Richard Bryan. Richard Bryan served as the 25th governor of Nevada from 1983 to 1989. He was a member of the Nevada State Senate. He also was Nevada Attorney General and a United States Senator. Welcome, Senator Bryan. Next, Bob Miller was the 26th governor of Nevada. He was the 26th governor of Nevada from 1989 to 1999. 10 years, that's a long time. I think there's probably people that still think you're governor, right?
Some people say it's a long time.
Governor Miller was Clark County District Attorney, Lieutenant Governor, and 2 years later became governor when his predecessor, Richard Bryan, resigned to become a U.S. Senator. And now the current governor of the state of Nevada, Brian Sandoval, is the 29th. Governor Sandoval is the 29th and current governor of the state of Nevada. He is a former judge of the United States District Court for the District of Nevada. He also served in the Nevada State Assembly. He was chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission and he was also Nevada Attorney General. A warm welcome, please, for our guests as we sit down and hopefully entertain and inform you. I'd like to start, that's fresh on our minds. His name was already mentioned here today, and many of you attended the Senator Raggio's memorial service in Reno this week. We run out of names to call the man, the giant. He was huge in Nevada politics. He left a legacy that is unmatched. And once again, he's one of those individuals that was admired by...
Yes, Senator Raggio.
And he's still with us today. He had to have the last word. I think we're okay. We all right? Good. I'd like to hear from each of you what you feel is Senator Raggio's legacy and how he will be remembered. Governor List, we'll start with you.
I would begin by saying that my memories and friendship with Bill go back to the days when he was a district attorney in Washoe County. And I think that it hasn't been said enough what a friend he was to the victims of crime. He was a fabulous prosecutor, named the #1 prosecutor, outstanding prosecutor in America, president of the National DA's Association, and just a fabulous leader, even in his younger years, with a compassion for the people that he served and ability to communicate. And he carried that, of course, on into the legislature, which is an epic, wonderful period of service. Just a terrific guy. We'll never replace him. There'll never be another Bill Raggio.
Senator Bryan?
Well, for those of you who are at the funeral know how I feel about Bill Raggio. He and I arrived in the state legislature the same year. This guy had a larger-than-life reputation. I thought, to be quite candidly, that he was going to be a flying handful when he came in. Would he make that transition from being this prosecutor that Bob List has talked about? And absolutely, how is he going to fit within the legislative process? And as I characterized it, Mitch, at the funeral, it was really a legislative golden age of collegiality. I mean, he was immediately embraced within the bosom of the lodge. He became a player immediately. And Bill had an unbelievable sense of timing, not just what the next move was, but like the grandmaster of chess, what the end game was. And he understood the role of compromise and how to work across both ends of the. And he's got a legacy of education, one of, I think, his great hallmarks in terms of what he did for education, both higher education and K-12.
Okay. Governor Miller?
Well, as Governor Bryant just said, education, of course, was a passion for him, particularly higher education. And he was a great educator. He educated me every day. I could never keep up with him. And he was a master at cloaking his own agenda so that you'd given away everything by the time you tried to figure out what it was that Bill really wanted. And what he really wanted was in the best interest of the state. And one of the things he said not too long before his passing, which is something I often repeat, is that compromise, negotiations are not a dirty word, and they seem to be less acceptable in today's environment than they were, but that was where he went. And I had the advantage in those 10 years that he was always the Republican side, I was the Democratic side, along with some legislators. But we all went in knowing we were going to reach a resolution. And he knew that, I knew that. We were going to get something that was in between, and that's a distinct advantage, I think, in situations where you go in and nobody wants to work with each other. And once he was elected, he was a Nevadan. That was, in my opinion, his legacy.
Governor Sandoval.
Thank you, Mitch. And first, Nevada Taxpayers Association, thank you for the invitation to be here. Senator Raggio, I also had the privilege of being at the service. I wanted to compliment Senator Bryan for his eulogy and his tribute to the senator. It was marvelous. I grew up in Washoe County, had the opportunity to admire and respect the senator and in a lot of different roles. When I ran for the legislature, he was my mentor, and I got to visit with him throughout my political career. I guess what I describe about him was my last words at the eulogy is that he's the best that we can do. He always thought of Nevada first. He put his family first. If you heard his daughter's words during the course of of her eulogy and how he always took such pride in his kids and his family, that's a part of the man that many of us don't get to see every day. So the world is a lot less for our loss of Senator Raggio, and as many of you may have heard me say, is if Nevada had a Mount Rushmore of statesmen, Bill Raggio's face would be etched on it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the process, because we all have fond memories of Senator Raggio, and we could talk about the days of the names Lamb, Gibson, Ashworth in those days, and some of you knew these men very well. there was always this collective agreement, as Governor Miller said, that you'd fight like all get out on the floor of the Senate or the Assembly, for example, but then at the end of the day, you'd come together. Now, it might be at the end of the session, but in the end, you'd come together and find some common ground and work through it. Has that changed significantly, and why? Go ahead, Senator Bryan.
Is the Pope a Catholic? Dramatically, and obviously this is not the forum to discuss why those changes occurred, but there was no Democratic caucus, Republican caucus in the time that I served. Jim Gibson was the master of the budget process. When Jim Gibson concluded, look, this is what we're going to need, that we're going to need some additional revenue this session. By and large, there was a reluctance, God, do we have to do it? But we did. There were no party line votes. I mean, the legislature was dominated by the people you just indicated. Milan Brown was the majority leader. Floyd Lamb was the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. The intellectual horsepower was Jim Gibson. Here comes Raggio, one of only 6 Republicans, and he is immediately welcomed into the bosom of the lodge. He became a player. That probably couldn't happen. So it has changed dramatically. And a lot of commentators can give you the reasons why, but that's not appropriate for us now. It's very different.
Governor List, is it possible to maintain your values and your principles and yet still compromise to get the job done, to pass legislation?
Absolutely it is. I worked with my Senate when I was governor, was controlled by the Democrats. And it starts with, it just starts with what's right for Nevada and be able to hash it out. And those things that we did were momentous in those days in the context of that time. And again, I attribute it to the attitude and the character of the members of the legislature. And they really, truly put Nevada first. And the names that have been mentioned, Jim Gibson, Floyd Lamb, Milan Brown, they stood up for what was right for Nevada. And I go back to the days when each county, actually, when I was a DA, each county had its own senator. There were just 17 senators, and there was really very, very seldom a mention of party affiliation. It was just stood up for what was right and came together, and it was just not a situation in which everybody was always looking to run for higher office, whether they were looking to please contributors. In those days, I think the contributors were less demanding also, putting less pressure on them, understanding that they were there to serve the state of Nevada. And the lobbyists were a different breed. They really were. I mean, the Wally Warrens of the world and folks of that kind that also put Nevada first. So, and maybe weren't a little less intent on behalf of their individual industries or employers. So it's the whole picture has changed, the whole dynamics.
Governor Sandoval, we had a great conversation at our table, and we discussed Senator Paul Laxalt, who couldn't be with us here today. And he could probably stand in that same lineup of the people that were able to work across the aisle. I remember I went to interview Senator Laxalt in the 80s when he was thinking about a presidential run, and they were going to line up an interview with me with Senator Kennedy because they were such good friends. They were so close. So you knew Senator Laxalt and still do very, very well. What does he epitomize, and why has it changed?
Well, and I got a couple comments. I can't talk about the early 70s because I was going into the 3rd grade.
You're much
Brutal. That hurts.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, what a clean shot. I thought we were going to have fun here.
I'm sorry, Senator. Now I lost the question, man. No, I've got it. You got it.
You were only in the 3rd grade.
No, Senator Laxalt, for me, just like Senator Raggio, epitomizes the essence of Nevada politics, class, dignity. When he walks in a room, everybody knows it because of the way he conducted himself, both in the state as a district attorney, as a lieutenant governor, as a governor, and as a U.S. senator. You know, I didn't have the opportunity to serve then, but when I came into the legislature in 1995, I had the privilege of serving with Governor Miller, and I had a gentleman by the name of Joe Deeney, who was the speaker. Lynn Hetrick was the co-speaker. Things were done right then, and I do have to say this, because I know there's a room full of legislators here. I think we did it right. There may be, we had our differences on the floor, but at the end of the day, we all worked together, we came together, we got the session done on time and didn't have to have a special session. We got the budget worked out. We were able to achieve education reform. We put together an economic diverse development plan that is going to be the envy of the United States. So I do believe that perhaps there's a renaissance that's going on. I'm proud of my relationship that I have with all the legislators in this room and those aren't in attendance today, whether they be Democrat or Republican. So we're going to keep that up.
We know how sincere you are, so we are going to believe that.
Despite his youth. Governor Miller, let me ask you, why has the political landscape deteriorated? Why is the public discourse coarsened? Is there a reason, and is there a way that we can, is it money in politics? Is it the 24-hour news cycle? What do you think?
Well, a lot of it has to do with redistricting every 10 years. It's not just a Nevada phenomenon, it's a national phenomenon. And we create districts that are relatively safe for one party or the other. Therefore, people in their primaries run to the core constituency group at one extreme or the other. And unfortunate byproduct is that it makes moderates less viable and to some degree extinct. And I think if you ask the average person, moderates is what they would like to have, people that are pragmatic, but we elect people now that are more ideologues. And it's both parties. I know Dick and I had arguments years ago with a local Democratic county chairman who was an ideologue, and we were trying to say, hey, you got to get some people elected here. You can't force just issues that are not practical. It happens in both parties now. And I look at the U.S. Senate, and that's an example, not just our state, but people that I have interacted with. Evan Bayh was governor when I was governor in Indiana, went on to the U.S. Senate. He's a moderate, and by anybody's definition, and of course Senator Bryan would know directly, and he finally got disgusted with the process. Those won't be his words, but he just said, no, this is ridiculous. When I want to go fight with people for all the time, nobody wants to work things out. And just recently, on the other side of the coin, he happens to be a Democrat, Olympia Snowe from Maine decided she's not going to run for the exact same reason. Well, if we keep eliminating people who are pragmatists and who are moderate in their beliefs, the system's going to get worse, not better. And the session that Governor Sandoval was in and mentioned was a good example. When that happened, it was a very unique part of Nevada history where we literally had a tie in the lower house, in the assembly. And most of you won't remember Mitch will because he was in the media. The media all said, this is going to be an absolute disaster. How are they going to do this? Because you're going to have half and half. Nothing's ever going to get resolved. And I spoke out publicly at the time because they had co-leaders, co-majority leaders, co-minority leaders, co-chairman of committees. I said, it's going to work because it has to.
Yeah. Because
neither side has an advantage. And they're going to get together and work it out because they're even. And that's exactly what happened. And that's unfortunately less true now, and it exacerbates the problem.
let me lighten it up a little bit and ask you about campaigning, because I know most politicians don't like campaigning. Probably the only politician I've ever met that really likes it is the man to my left. He loves campaigning. He really does. And I was talking to Pete Goichi, I don't know, he was telling me about this district, is he still there? That goes from Jarbidge to Mount Charleston, right? So in the middle of that kind of district, you're going to meet all sorts of people, and you're going to have all sorts of stories to tell about the interesting and colorful Nevadans that reside in the state. And there are quite a bit of color. So I'm going to, if you can just real quickly think about some interesting campaign stories, or what was it like to go the length and the breadth of this state and meet everyone from, you know, the residents here in Las Vegas to in Jarbidge, whatever. So Governor List, you got anything you can recall from statewide campaigns?
Well, I was a private pilot, very active as a pilot, and we had a small single-engine plane, and I took that thing into every dirt road and hayfield in the state of Nevada, campaigned literally from Jarbidge to Laughlin, what there was of Laughlin in those days, and campaigned everywhere. Always kept my saddle in the back of the luggage compartment in case we had a parade to go to where I was going to be riding a horse. And of course, in Nevada, and it's still a wonderful opportunity to be able to go to every single town and get to know people. And I find that Paul Laxalt used to say, the great thing about Nevada is that the people are really honest with you. And generally that's true. Generally that's true. Once you get elected, some of them maybe press that principle a little bit, but they really are. They tell you what they want. They tell you what they're looking for. They know your background, and Nevada's still a place where everybody can meet a candidate for governor, and we really are I've always thought of it as almost like three separate regions. You know, northwestern Nevada with Tahoe and Reno and Carson City is very unique and very homogeneous, and Douglas County I'd throw in there too. And then Clark County is very unique and generally pulls together. And then all of rural Nevada, which is another story entirely. Very, very different kind of people. And so it's fun to campaign out there. I love the people in Nevada, and I think the biggest thing I guess I would say about campaigning is that everyone looks at campaigning as a time when the constituents and the voters get to know the candidate and get to know what the candidate stands for. I always thought of it as sort of being the other way around. The candidate gets to know the state, gets to know all the people, all the regions, and I would just add one, so it's a tremendous educational opportunity when you get out there and campaign. I would add one other thing, which is, back in the 1850s, we had the riders that went across and carried the mail across Nevada. And I always think back that I feel a little bit, I liken a campaign to being a little bit like the way that they worked it, which was at every station the rider got a new horse to go to the next station to carry the mail. Only in a campaign, you feel like you're the horse, and every station you get a new rider, because it never stops. But it's a thrilling experience, and it makes candidates better officials once they're elected.
Senator Bryan?
Well, I'm not as old as Bob List. I don't recall the Pony Express. But I accept what he's telling me as being the truth. I think what Bob is talking about is retail politics, and Mitch made an indirect reference. I did like that. I mean, I loved the parade. I loved the banquets. I even loved the food. And I really enjoyed that, but I think Bob's point is you really get to meet people and to know what they're thinking, and they get to know you, and you get a feel for the state. It's not all Las Vegas or Reno or whatever it is, and it really is a wonderful thing. I think, unfortunately, because the state has grown so large, that plays less of a role. You know, when Bob and I were running, boy, we were on the Labor Day weekend. It started at Elko. It moved to Winnemucca. There was an event in Lovelock, and we finished the largest pancake breakfast in the history of the world in Fallon on Labor Day. You never miss those.
With the cantaloupe.
With the cantaloupe and the hot butter. Boy, they did it. So but a couple of cute stories, if I may. This was when I was running for the Senate. We did a lot of I think I was actually already elected. We were doing a town hall meeting in Caliente, and we'd send out everybody, in the zip code, and it was at the Caliente Senior Center, and seniors were there kind of setting up some stuff, but only one person showed up. And he said to me, "Where is Senator Dole?" Dole was running for president that year. And I said, "Well, no, he's not here. I'm Senator Bryan." "Oh," he said, and he left. Another story, and then this is a great one. It's in Ely, and Marlene Lockhart, who's here, was doing all of my scheduling, and I was out there campaigning. I was going from Ely to Las Vegas, and The first indication that something was awry is that I was scheduled to leave at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and the pilot, it was Moya Lear's plane and her pilot, showed up at 9 o'clock in the morning. I thought, gee, this is not an auspicious beginning. We took off from the airport at Ely, which had some kind of a landing system. Bob is a pilot, he might go, but you had to somehow connect with McCarran to get the lights on at Ely. And as we took off, he said, you know, I forgot my glasses. He said, I'm a little farsighted. Could you read the gauges for me? True story. If you've flown from Ely to Las Vegas, unlike the western part of the thing, there's really not anything in between. So there's not a lot of towns that you can kind of, yeah, that must be, gosh, we must be getting close to Yerington or to Hawthorne or to Tonopah. So we went this endless time, and I'm not a pilot, and you know, he's communicating, you know, in terms of, you know, what kind of bearing he's taken, and I said, well, the little fingers at the 8 and the big finger. So finally we broke out, and I recognized Las Vegas. I recognized that, and all of a sudden he turns left the bank sharply. I said, no, that's Nellis Air Force Base. True story.
Governor Miller.
I think one of my first experiences in rural Nevada, I was actually a justice of the peace, and I was going to a meeting, and I happened to be there during one of the parades, and there was a candidate for lieutenant governor, and I remember it well. I was just standing with the crowd and watching, and he and his wife went by, and they went by in like a Mercedes-Benz convertible, and I listened to the locals all saying, well, that's phony, and who do they think they are? I learned right away to go to rural Nevada, these are extinct. And you put on Levi's, and you had to talk to every person because it's a smaller community. They expect you to be at these events. I would recommend, if you become governor, you don't follow in succession Dick Bryan, because every event that any family has even had, he's attended. And they now think it's a tradition for the governor. You missed our son's bar mitzvah. Dick was there for older son's bar mitzvah. Why weren't you there? But rural Nevada is a different culture. It's more laid back. It's more personal, and the state has grown dramatically. From hundreds of years ago when we were governors to now where Governor Sandoval in the modern century is governor. And as a result, elections, a lot of them are based on media, and it'll become even more so. But that personal touch is rewarding, and it's fun. I mean, it's fun to be able to get out and go on those parades. And I think, and Joe Ross might not think it's fun because he kind of hated having to be in the parade and have everybody laughing at him all the time. If you look at pointing at him. But for me, I'd sit there and do that and have my kids harass me because it was, you go each of these parades and say, hi. But out there you get real one-to-one conversations, and you just don't see much of that in modern politics. You can see snippets of it now in the presidential caucuses and the like, where they're going and trying to, line up votes, and that's the part of it that happens in Nevada is only in rural Nevada. In Reno and in Las Vegas, we've become much more media-driven.
And Governor Sandoval, has it become so media-driven that you don't have as much one-on-one time, for example, as these other gentlemen?
Well, and I try to still keep that retail tradition in our state. I think that's one of the beauties of Nevada politics is you still get to know your governor, all your constitutional officers, your legislators. I tell people if you're in California, the closest you get to the constitutional officers is waving in a restaurant. So it's really a Nevada tradition that I want to preserve. I also am an admirer of the Bryan School of Politics and campaigns, and heard the stories about when all the campaign staff went to bed and the good senator went to the bowling alley and met some more people as they were bowling in their leagues. And I learned the lesson from you to stand at the front of the food line so you meet everybody as they go through. But probably one of my favorite stories this past race is that, yes, you do get to travel throughout the state. And one of the difficulties now, because we've become such a big state and there are so many different things going on, you have to make choices. Are you going to be in Boulder City or are you going to be in Summerlin on the 4th of July? Those kind of decisions. But there was one meeting, a community meeting in Winnemucca, and I was at the Martin Hotel. And I don't know how many of you have had an opportunity to be there, but it's a great Basque restaurant in one of those Nevada landmarks. And we'd had a community meeting, and I wasn't going to miss a good dinner at the Martin. So I'm eating, and there's this big cowboy standing at the doorway and staring at me, and I kind of look over, and I said, this isn't going to be good. And so I took my time eating dinner, hoping that he would move on his way, but he didn't. And finished dinner, stood up, and he charged right up to me and said, aren't you Brian Sandoval? And I said, yes, I am. Aren't you running for governor? Yes, I am. Well, I don't know if I'm going to vote for you. And I said, well, sir, what do I have to do to earn your vote? And he said, well, you have to pet my dog. This true story. So I said, where's your dog? Hoping it's just going to be like a dachshund or something. Come out the door, and they said, he's across the street. And I look across the street, and there's this mongrel dog tied up at the back end of this truck. And I thought to myself, please don't let it be this one. And one of my campaign staff said, sir, you really don't have to do this. And I said, I'm in, I've gone too far. So I walked across the street, decided to stick my hand out, and I pet the dog, and he wags his tail. And I looked back at the gentleman, and he looked at me, and he said, I can't believe he didn't bite you. So he said, I'm going to vote for you. So that's how I won the Humboldt County vote. But an absolute true story.
Let me ask you a little bit about life in the governor's mansion, because most of the people here have been over there for receptions or whatever, and unless it's changed, it's in the middle of a neighborhood in Carson City, middle class, upper middle class neighborhood. There's not much parking around there. You pull up, and it's a beautiful house, but you're living with all these other people in this neighborhood. So I'm sure there's that transition between what you were prior to being governor and then being governor with family, if you had family there and whatnot, getting them adjusted to schools and whatnot. But then, what about neighbors coming over for a bowl of sugar or something? Did you see strange incidences occur since you've been in the residence, Governor List?
Well, I guess I have some very good memories. We had 3 children in the mansion, and we're raising them there, and of course their friends are coming and going, and the house on one occasion got toilet papered, got TP'd, which was one of the things that happened in those days. I also remember the morning that my oldest daughter had just gotten a driver's license, and so she was privileged for the first time to be able to go out and take the family car, which will remain a very ugly brown 1975 Ford Torino station wagon. She goes out to the garage, and I hear this big crash, and I run outside, and what's happened? She forgot to open the garage door before she backed out. And there's also a postscript. Years later, we were having a family reunion, and that same daughter confessed to me that she was driving that same car back from Reno one day with her friends, with a carload of girlfriends, and got pulled over by the highway patrol for speeding. And the highway patrolman says, List, when he looked at her driver's license, he said, you're not related to the governor. She said, well, actually, that's my dad. He said, don't give me that. He said, no governors would own a car like this. So he says, you go home and don't you tell your father I said that. So I didn't find out about that until years later. But there was the usual sneaking in and out of the house, I think. Probably one thing I do remember, also I learned later, was that one night the burglar alarm went off in the mansion. And the sheriff's office called and said, stay upstairs, stay in your room, don't come down, keep the children upstairs, because the motion detector indicates that there's a prowler that's in the downstairs part of the house. So, that was it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, later on, they turned off the alarm, they came and searched the house, and they announced that that actually it had been one of our dogs, a Labrador, had been left in the house by mistake. In later years, I learned that that wasn't the case at all. It was one of my daughters sneaking in. But the poor old dog, Clark, took all the heat.
Senator Bryan?
Well, like Bob, we had 3 young children growing up in the mansion. I think the thing before Bob Miller was able to have that additional annex, which entertainment, I mean, the front room of the mansion was public property. You'd come in several nights a week, and there'd be some event that was being held there. It was in the bipartisan spirit of the time. The Carson City Women's Republican Club met at least one Saturday every month in the mansion, part of the tradition. So it was really, there wasn't a whole lot of privacy for the first family, but it was shortly after I had been elected, and a couple of folks in Las Vegas came on up to visit. One of them was Judge McGordy's wife, Nancy. As they knocked on the door, somebody welcomed in the house, had them seated on this couch laying back, and before they realized what was happening, there was a blood drive being conducted that morning. Each of them gave blood. Nancy McGordy got a little ill. You know, we didn't have as many people visiting us unannounced. The other thing, and this was a tradition of all the governors, the Wolfpack barbecue, dating back to Paul Laxalt's time, was really one of the outstanding events in the backyard, and it used to be almost exclusively a stag event. And sometimes the entertainment got a little rough, and the neighbors would call the next day. And sometime we didn't do as good a job as planning as I know that Brian Sandoval would do. We did not have enough outdoor porta potties. You can imagine the neighbors were not particularly endured, you know, if they had young daughters out that night to say, what in the world is going on, you know, in the backyard. The other thing that was interesting, I think many of you know, is that the staff at the mansion consists, in addition to maybe 1 or 2 others, inmates from the penitentiary. They're all felons. And so I'm coming home early in the election. Bonnie's going through this list. You know, there's murder, armed robbery, you know, assault with a deadly weapon, and she's selecting the people that are going to be. And she's saying, no, she says, the warden says, you've always got to go for the murderers. They're the best. Some truth to that. And I have to say, with all due respect, Bonnie had generally excellent judgment, but she made a selection to have 1 gentleman and 1 lady from the women's prison, and they disappeared one afternoon. Without going into too much detail, let me say they became amorously involved under the front porch of the mansion. They were not invited back. It took quite a search, but they found them.
I don't know how you can top that.
When you become governor, just before you start, you go to a conference of the national governors that is called the New Governors Conference. I call it How to Be a Governor 101.
Yeah.
And the governors have been in office kind of mentor you for a while. The first one we went to, I was riding on a bus, and there was a few governors sitting there talking, and this governor from Arkansas was talking. And he was explaining about a situation that he'd had at the governor's mansion in Arkansas, where someone had scaled the fence, and it took 2 or 3 of the troopers on duty to bring him to the ground and subdue him. And I was laughing. I hadn't met the man. I was laughing. He looked at me and said, well, what's so funny? I said, well, in the first place, we don't have a fence. And in the second place, when he gets to the door, it's him and me. And that, of course, was Bill Clinton. But the mansion is in the middle of a residential area. Unfortunately, most people in the southern Nevada don't really get an opportunity to see it. It's historically used for all kinds of social activities. And up until at the end of my term, the common practice was, as Senator Bryan said, is to let anybody who wanted to use it. He mentioned the Republican Women's Club Carson City, for example, and there was a form that said, you know, you want to use it, when do you want to use it? And on it, it said that the governor's presence is required, requested. And I remember, you know, a year or 2 into my term, they had submitted it back and said, "Not desired." But it was your house, but it was a house in which there was always any number of other people. And all the furniture in the front would get moved depending upon the number of people, etc. We too had 3 children. Ross obviously was here and his sister Corinne, but we also had a baby born in the mansion, Megan. And so several years into when she got a little bit older, I'd come home and somebody would say, "Oh, or I'd see them at an event and they'd say, 'Your daughter was just delightful, the song and dance she did.' I said, 'What?' I said, 'Well, we had this luncheon at the mansion and your 4-year-old daughter came down and she went around to talk to everybody at the table and then she did a little dance.' And I said, 'Well, she doesn't dance.' Well, she did at the luncheon." So you had to kind of marry, those circumstances of how to have a normal life. And near the end of our 10 years, which was time for us to understand and appreciate that, decided that it really needed to be some changes. I mean, the state was growing. There were a lot of issues around the country where security had become an issue. And so, with the help of a couple of actually mostly Southern Nevadans, Larry Rubo and Tony Marnell and Sig Rogich, we raised a lot of private funds and changed the mansion so that all of my successors, including Governor Sandoval, don't have to have people in the literal house all the time. The events are in a room that was built next to the living quarters, and the entrance is on the other end. So you can actually come in the house and people are at an event wouldn't know whether you're coming or going, which was impossible for any of us, a century ago when we were governors. So it gives you, a different feeling, and there is some security in the mansion now, which changes it and hopefully makes it, a more practical situation, so that when you're a first family, you have the opportunity to go in to be involved in every activity, but you don't have to be in every activity. So our remembrance was like that. I remember, and I'll just close with this, Ross, when he was writing the application for, I think, Stanford, where he ended up going, and he pointed out there's 2 sides to being a governor's child. That you would come home and you have this momentous thing that you're bursting to tell your parents, and if all you in family life understand that, you want to get home, you want to tell your parents, all your kids want to tell you that, but your parents aren't there. And it's like, a day later or so before you see your parents, because they're out at an event, come in at 10 o'clock at night, you're ready to sleep, etc. And then you come downstairs getting ready to go to school, and there's 300 Shriners. so it's not a normal life. But it is an exciting one, and it's fulfilling every day. And you're right in the hub of activities in the house that you live in, or at least adjacent to it.
Governor Sandoval.
Thank you. And first, I owe Governor Miller a big debt of gratitude, because I have a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 7-year-old, and we now have security cameras, so none of them can sneak out without us knowing. But there's one of the rooms in the house has a drawer, and there's a piece of plastic over it, and it has Megan's signature and Leslie's signature in it, and my daughter Marissa, who's 7, can't wait to put her signature on there as well. But I guess we've been in there for 14 months. I like to call the governor's mansion the people's house, because it truly is the people of Nevada's house. There are a lot of events there. One of the things that we're earning a reputation for is the number of animals that we have at the house. We have 4 dogs, 2 cats, a turtle, and 2 guinea pigs. And Mayor Kroll, who we all know and respect, the mayor of Carson City, welcomed me, came over and welcomed the family to Carson City, and I said, "Well, Mr. Mayor, you already did welcome us." And he said, "How's that?" And I said, "Well, your animal control was on our doorstep the first day we moved in to make sure that we had our dog licenses." But there are a lot of different experiences. Speaking of animals, and Senator Bryan brought up the trustees. One day, one of the dogs got out and was sprinting down the street, and one of the trustees went after it and was halfway down the block, and then suddenly realized they're going to think I'm trying to escape. True story. And I keep saying that because it is stranger than fiction. But it's a wonderful privilege. My kids are doing great. It is hard, as Governor Miller said. I haven't seen my 16-year-old son since Sunday. And we have a very busy schedule, and that is one of the challenges of being a father and a husband, and also being the governor, is being away from your family, being away from your spouse. But they've been wonderful. We've had some great experiences. My 7-year-old has the sleepovers, and the kids love to hide in the different rooms. My son had some friends over last winter, and they had an epic snowball fight between some folks up on the balcony and on the bottom floor. But already we have memories of a lifetime, and it's just such a privilege to be able to sit on the stage with these gentlemen and think about all the memories and experiences they had. Thank you.
One last question. I think we have time for one last question. That is, looking back on your tenure as governor, what were some of the things that you're proudest of, accomplishments, and then maybe some things that didn't happen, maybe because of budgetary constraints or a recalcitrant legislature or whatever reason that maybe you would have liked to have seen and did not. And then that's me 2, and then 3, give some advice to the current governor.
Ooh.
Brian Sandoval. You first, Governor List.
Well, let me take the one that I would have liked to have seen. That's the easiest one. With no disrespect, I would have liked to have seen a re-election. In terms of accomplishments, it was a very difficult period of time. Nevada was going through much the same kind of economic period then as we have experienced in recent times. It was that some of you remember here in this room that it was a time of the misery index and so forth, with huge high unemployment, interest rates up in the 20% range and so forth. And we had an enormous drop in revenue in the state. We had to cut a lot of jobs. It was a difficult time, but despite all that, I must say that we had some significant accomplishments. Among them, I would mention first, and I consider it to this day to have been an accomplishment, a major reform of our apropos to the Taxpayers Association, of our state tax structure, in which we did a significant reduction for property tax for Nevada citizens. We raised the sales tax, which is paid to a larger extent, of course, by our visitors and by out-of-state people. And despite all the criticism about that particular tax structure, even to this day, there have been no significant material changes to it. Although we're always open to new ideas, it's somehow weathered the storm during this 30-year period. I would also mention a special session in which we adopted a compact that I'd put together with Jerry Brown, who was then governor of California, for Lake Tahoe, TRPA. But I think most importantly on my watch, and it hasn't drawn a whole lot of publicity, but I've been thinking about it a lot recently as we opened the Mob Museum downtown, and I've heard a lot about the history, the old Nevada, the original times when the mob was in the gaming industry. It fell upon me on my watch as governor to revoke all the licenses of the mob in Nevada. We revoked the licenses at the Aladdin, Circus Webby, despite continued continuances from Judge Claiborne, the late Judge Claiborne. We fought that one through. And it ultimately was licensed to Wayne Newton. The Stardust and the Fremont hotels, we threw out the Argent people, Alan Glick, and the wiretaps that were involved there demonstrated ties to the Kansas City mob, the Sevilla family, the Chicago mob, represented by Spilatro and Lefty Rosenthal. Of course, I had prosecuted him and taken him to the United States Supreme Court to prevent his licensing at the Stardust when I was Attorney General. But the mob continued there until I was governor. We took their license. We took the license from the Dunes, from Morris Schenker. Went on, of course, Steve Wynn bought that property, and today we have the Bellagio and City Center and the Monte Carlo in New York, New York, that occupy what was the Dunes and the Dunes golf course. And so the Tropicana particularly, and I'll tell one quick story about that. There was a fellow named Joe Augusto. Some of you remember he was supposedly running the Folies Bergère entertainment program at the Tropicana. And it turned out that he was, in fact, a front for the Kansas City mob, the Sevilla family, and the DeLunas, and Carl Thomas was involved, who was a local guy, and others. We took all their licenses away, but in the course of it, there was a particular wiretap in which he had boasted that he had Clean Face in his pocket. Clean Face, of course, being Harry Reid. And so there was a tremendous cloud of suspicion fell over Harry Reid as chairman of the Gaming Commission, who was suddenly accused by a mobster as having been cooperative with them and working with them. And I came under a lot of pressure to ask Harry for his resignation. He came to me one day and we sat down and he offered his resignation. I said, well, are the allegations true? He said, no, it breaks my heart to have to offer you my resignation, but I think it's in the best interest of the state until I'm cleared up. And I believed him. And I don't think I've ever told this story publicly. I said, Harry, give me your word that these allegations are not true, and he did. And I said, all right, I don't want you to resign because it's going to look horrible for the state of Nevada to have our Gaming Commission chairman resign under this kind of a cloud. I said, you stay on. And he did, and I continued to take heat. There came a day when the FBI cleared him and actually issued a letter that he was, that in effect, Augusto was boasting about a relationship to his pals back in Kansas City, and that Harry was not playing that role. And Harry then came to me and offered his resignation, said, you know, now I can leave under a bright light, positive situation, and I accepted his resignation. And in fact, we put Carl Dodge in, as a great former legislator, as the chairman of the Gaming Commission.
Now, one quick word of advice to the current governor.
Quick word. Sorry, that was too long of an answer, but I wanted you all to know that story. It's an example of bipartisanship. Word of advice. I feel humble giving this advice, but it is simply continue to be yourself, Governor. Do what you're doing. Operate from the heart. Operate. I was privileged to be with your mom at church on Sunday. I don't think you know that, but follow the lessons that she taught you. Always keep your promises. She told me she told you that.
Yes.
Senator Bryan.
Well, I'm not sure I could give the governor any. I saw those soaring poll numbers, the governor. I'm not sure any of us ever saw those numbers. But I think you're doing a wonderful job, and I think those of us as former governors, irrespective of our party affiliation, if there's anything that we can do to help your administration do what's right for the people in the state of Nevada, we ought to follow the same advice that we're given. This is about the state of Nevada. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. That would be polite. So, you know, Bob sets the tone. It was a difficult time. I mean, revenues were falling, and we weren't sure that we were going to be able to meet the cash flow in the first month that I took office. So we were gifted to have a guy like Bill Bible, who a number of you know served very ably for Governor Miller to chair the Gaming Control Board, the longest-serving chairman of the Gaming Control Board, if members are. But he was kind of our budget guru. And the first thing we did that first week of the session is we asked that the gaming taxes, which were then collected on a every 3-month basis, that we, in effect, collect those on a monthly basis so we could get the. And so we kind of put that together. And then clearly we had to do something in terms of our economic diversification, the same thing that Governor Sandoval and all the legislators are dealing with. And so we reconstituted the economic development efforts into a system which, until the governor, working in a bipartisan way with the current legislature, changed that, and we created various areas in the state, gaming and so much more, to try to, in effect, to bring in new business and new industry. One of the things that I think was successful, I see Berlin Miller over there, is about Citibank was thinking about creating a new credit card processing center in the West. New Mexico had fumbled the ball. That's where they wanted to go first, and we picked the ball up. The late Governor Kenny Gwinn was then chairman of one of the large savings and loans, and so I went together with a group from Southern Nevada and met with Walter Wriston, the chairman of the board at Citibank. And he pulled me aside and he said, look, I need a change in the Bank Holding Company Act. Now, as you know, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I didn't have any idea what the hell he was talking about. But I said, is that what it would take? I said, if I call the special session and you get that, you got to put it here, 1,000 people or more. He said, I would. I called Bill Janko, Republican governor of South Dakota, where they've been. I said, do these guys keep their word? And they did, and they came. And in effect, that was really a big boost because it was a time when, in effect, the back end of the financial institutions no longer had to be cited in the major financial markets, New York. And so Citibank came, and that was followed by Household Bank. And so I think that was something that was will be regarded as an accomplishment. We, as part of a statewide effort on tourism, we spent less than Guam each year, spent about $40,000. And so we created a special event category. We added a penny to the room tax provided to the local convention authorities. Herb McDonald became the first one to head up the special events. That was the genesis for bringing in the rodeo, National Finals Rodeo, and other special events. And we funded a state tourism effort that I think had some success. History will tell there. And then we tried to emphasize Southern Nevada and Northern Nevada and all of rural Nevada as a venue for film productions. And I think that was successful. One of the fun things is that one of the many Rocky movies, and Sylvester Stallone came up. Now, you've all seen him in the film. I thought the guy would be the size of Man Mountain Dean, only from the waist up. He's shorter than I am. And we did a little arm wrestling thing, and my arm kind of looked like a toothpick, and his looked like kind of a log. But, I mean, we had a little fun doing that. So those kind of things, I think, were helpful. And then I was very much interested in re-energizing the ethics commissions. The state legislature, I had worked with Sue Wagner, Republican from Washoe County, and getting, some legislation to require financial disclosure, to require, your campaign contributions to be identified, for lobbyists to register, and I wanted to re-energize it. We did some of that, so I think that was something else that looked like I think it worked well. And then I was very much interested in environmental issues, and following what the governor did at Lake Tahoe, I think we made a couple of pretty good appointments up there to keep what I always used to say is nature's gift to Nevada, and that's Lake Tahoe.
Very good. Governor Miller?
Well, let's see, that was a 4-year summary and a 6-year summary. I'm 10 years, so sit back. You got an hour and a half. When I became governor, through the courtesy of Senator Bryan, I was an acting governor. And for those of you, some of you that know my wife, you'll know that the extreme passion she had and still has for education. We looked at the preparatory budget that Governor Bryan had put together to try to work on it. And I knew that if I wanted to have a place to come home at night, or at least to have someone allow me in the door, that I'd better do something that related to improving the quality of education. And so I embarked on a program for initial class size reduction in the lower classes, but there wasn't sufficient revenue in there. And I remember sitting in the room with my advisors, all of them saying, you can't seek new revenues. Are you crazy? You haven't even been elected. I mean, you're never going to get elected in the next election if the first thing you do is seek some new revenues. And I said, well, what the hell's the sense of being here if I'm not going to do anything positive as it relates to education? I think if I explain it in the next election, then people will understand, which which of course is what happened. And we worked with diverse groups. We worked with the Carol Villardo Association, or whatever the pseudonym you give for it is, and others, and made some moderate, very modest really, changes in the structure to do that. So we started embarking on that, and in the course of the 10 years over there, kept looking at the quality of education, both K-12 and higher education. We put in new studies and changes and assessments and accountability, many of which Governor Sandoval is now looking at again, and I think need to be reviewed consistently and constantly. We put in a lot of money into higher education, improving a lot of the buildings there. So a lot of the focus was on education, but in the course of the 10 years, I went through economic uptimes and downtimes. In the downtimes, we had a recession, nothing compared to what it is now, but I take some pride in the fact that we immediately froze jobs, positions, made some dramatic changes and cuts, some of which were popular, some of which weren't, and we kept our bond rating the same, whereas other states, particularly California, had their bond rating reduced during that same time frame. So I felt like we approached it correctly at that particular time. I worked bipartisanly with the former state senator Mark James in reforming the criminal justice system, because I'd come from a law enforcement background. Much like Bill Raggio, I'd been the district attorney. I too had been the national president. I felt I have an opportunity here to change the criminal justice system and lock up the people that need to be locked up and find other routes to keep the costs in line for others. We reformed the state workmen's compensation system. It was $2.3 billion in arrears. And at the time, in dealing with it, I said we had a board that oversaw it, and was a conflicting board, part labor, part management. They didn't really agree on anything, so they weren't getting things done. And I said, well, I'll just take it over. And I know that Bill, in his wisdom, was laughing at me at the time, saying, well, we'll let this dummy take it over, and he'll have to live with the results. But we did, and we took it over and got that on the right track, and my successor, Governor Gwynn, moved it to the logical extension of privatization. We reformed government, and I had a fellow named Kenny Gwynn chair of that committee. We reduced the boards and commissions in their numbers. We reduced the direct reports to the governor. We tried to streamline government, because if you are ever going to look at appropriate revenues, you also have to be able to convince people that you're constantly taking an inward look and getting rid of things that don't need to be there, that have outlived their usefulness, et cetera. So those are probably the highlights. I might be forgetting some things. And what I would say to Brian, I remember that one of my predecessors said to me is that it's going to go a lot faster than you think. And try and enjoy as much as you can. I know it's very difficult to do, because one day you're doing something, and unlike other people, you don't get to savor it. You're off doing the next thing the next day. But try and enjoy it as you are, and find time to prioritize time for yourself and your family. I drove the Carson City School District crazy, because I would be calling them months in advance and saying, I want to know when his basketball games are scheduled. I want to know when my daughter's stuff is scheduled. And so we don't have it scheduled this far out. And I said, well, I'm getting pressure to be somewhere, and I don't want to be somewhere else on those days. And I know from watching that that's a priority you have. And that's the most important priority, because at whatever time you're out of the governor's mansion, the family's still going to be there, and you want them to remember you as somebody they actually interacted with during those years.
Governor Sandoval, I'll give you the last word. I know you've got barely 2 years under your belt. You can certainly reflect on those years, but maybe looking forward, what do you hope to accomplish? What are some of your goals as governor?
Well, first, again, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'm in my 15th month. I've been given a gift, because I have the gift of following these great leaders in Nevada history. I had an opportunity to work with Governor Miller when I was in the legislature on the Truth in Sentencing bill. I sat on the Labor and Management Committee when we did that workers' compensation reform, and I always appreciate the time that he took with me and gave me guidance. Senator Bryan, I was the chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission, and we had a little to do with the NCAA and legalized sports betting. And I had to testify in front of Congress, and that was a pretty nervous time for me and an anxious time. And Senator Bryan took the time to sit down with me before the committee hearing. During the committee hearing, he protected me and gave me some cover and things. So that's something that I'll always remember. And Governor List, when I was the Attorney General, he was always somebody that I could go to seek advice. Right when I was a candidate for governor, he was always there for me to provide his advice and his insights into the issues of the day. I've read the biographies of every governor in the history of our state. Every governor has had to confront these difficult issues, and it really is helpful to have the benefit of their wisdom and their experience when I make the decisions that I have to make. When you talk about the future, Mitch, I mean, I'm really proud of what I was able to accomplish with the help of the legislature in terms of what I talked about before, in terms of education reform and modernizing the economic development that Senator Bryan had started, and getting Nevada back to work essentially. The economy, the state is improving. People are starting to feel better. I think probably there are a lot of things that I look back on, but one of those is the relationship that I feel that I've established with the members of the legislature. One of my priorities was to sit down with each and every one of them, all 63, and have that personal conversation. Looking back at the state of the state, one of the lines that I used was that Nevada will be Nevada again. And I think today is emblematic of that. That's what I meant. People ask me, what did you mean by that? And when you listen to Governor List and Senator Bryan and Governor Miller, and they talk about what Nevada was like and the collaboration and working together and making these tough decisions, that's what we talked about at Senator Raggio's funeral, was that at the end of the day, to always make a decision based on what's best for the people of the state of Nevada. And so, as I said, it's a gift to be able to follow in the footsteps of these gentlemen. It's an honor and a privilege to serve as the governor of this great state. We have challenges in front of us, but I'm going to continue to work together with the legislators, work together with the superintendents. We have Dwight Jones and Heath Morrison that are here. We have Regent Page, who's here, working with the universities. I haven't seen this kind of collaboration in a very long time. I'm working with the local government officials from across the state, everywhere from Mayor Goodman here in Las Vegas on to the county commissioners in Elko County. Everybody is in it for the same reason. We all know that Nevada's in a tough spot and that we are not going to get back to where we want to be unless we all work together. So I'm looking forward to the rest of this year, 2013 and beyond. Thank you.
On that note, can we thank 4 Nevada governors and welcome Barbara back to the podium.